There's a time of day that seems to have a peculiar effect on the lives of many folks over 60. 3 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter if they went to bed early or late, if they were tired or at ease, it's as if an invisible alarm clock goes off inside them at the very same instant. Many wake up for no apparent reason, glance at the clock, and there it is, 3 a.m. This pattern has intrigued not only doctors, but also scholars of broader subjects concerning the mind, body, and spirit. It's more than just a common detail of aging. For some, it's a sign. For others, a biological coincidence. But there's a deeper reason behind this repeated phenomenon. And what few realize is that a very old explanation was left behind by one of the most mysterious figures of the last century, only to be forgotten over time. His name still provokes intense debate among doctors, spiritualists, and students of human behavior. For decades, the accounts piled up. Men and women in their golden years in different parts of the world, without any contact with one another, described the exact same scenario. A sudden awakening between 3 and 4 in the morning, generally accompanied by deep thoughts, restlessness, or even a sense of a presence in the room. Some feel peace, others are confused, but nearly all wonder why this happens so frequently, precisely at this stage of life. It's only natural that in seeking answers, they end up finding only generic explanations. However, those who delve a little deeper discover that Edgar Cayce already spoke about it. His records indicate that this time plays a special role for the human mind when the body begins to age. If you find this investigation helpful, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. That helps us bring even more clear and objective content your way. Cayce maintained that there's a window between 2 and 4 in the morning in which the mind is freer from external influences. For him, it was at this time that the soul could communicate more clearly because the body was at rest, but consciousness still vibrated at subtle levels. Especially among older folks, this sensitivity would increase over time, as if life were preparing a person to deal with deeper issues. Waking up at this hour, according to him, wasn't a sleep disorder, but rather a natural call to pay attention to something that isn't usually heard during the day. He saw it as an opportunity, not a nuisance. Throughout his readings, Cayce described dozens of cases in which people reported this type of awakening, and instead of trying to go back to sleep immediately, decided to observe what they felt at that moment. Many said they found peace, answers, or even inspiration. This awakening pattern also caught the attention of sleep researchers, but from a different angle. Doctors often attribute it to hormonal changes, shifts in the circadian rhythm, and the lighter sleep experienced by older adults. Indeed, as the years go by, the body produces less melatonin, which can make sleep more fragmented. However, these factors don't explain why so many wake up precisely at the same hour, without any clear physiological reason. Science recognizes the phenomenon, but is still seeking convincing answers. For Cayce, this wasn't a problem to be solved, but rather a sign to be interpreted. He said the body responds to the movements of the soul, and that certain times of day facilitate this connection. Therefore, when someone wakes up at 3 in the morning frequently, it may be more than a coincidence. It may be a reminder to look inward, review thoughts, and notice what has been ignored. Many seniors report that waking up at this hour comes with thoughts that are different from those they have during the day. They aren't common worries, but reflections on life, old memories, or even a feeling that something important needs to be done. In some cases, there are those who describe it as a silent sense of urgency, difficult to explain but impossible to ignore. It's at this point that Cayce's ideas regain meaning. He believed that with advancing age, the soul seeks ways to reorganize what has been left undone, and that the silence of the night opens space for this to happen with greater clarity. Waking up at 3 may be, then, a kind of internal warning that something needs attention, not of the body, but of the spirit, not as an illness, but as a natural process of preparation for another phase, a kind of silent conversation that occurs when all the noises of life cease. It's curious to notice that these reports have become more common precisely in recent years, when people have started to live longer and with more clarity, This has allowed experiences previously considered isolated to be seen as part of a broader pattern. In the old days, someone who woke up frequently in the wee hours of the morning simply accepted it as a nuisance of old age. Today, with more information and access to old records such as Cayce's, new interpretations are emerging. And many make sense to those who experience it. It's not about believing blindly, but about observing more attentively. Are these silent nights just coincidence, or do they say something we don't yet fully understand? This doubt is the starting point for a personal investigation that can bring more clarity and even comfort. After all, understanding one's own body and mind is a way to live better. In analyzing the accounts left by Cayce, one perceives that he wasn't only talking about spirituality in the religious sense. He treated consciousness as a real dimension of the human being, as important as the physical body. When he said that the soul manifests itself more clearly during the night, he was referring to moments when the rational mind is in the background. For older folks, this intensifies. With fewer obligations and more time for themselves, the senior citizen begins to listen more to what they feel and less to what the world demands. This silent state can open internal doors that were previously closed by the rush of everyday life. Therefore, for Cayce, waking up at 3 in the morning could be an invitation to this type of listening. A rare moment in which there are no external distractions, only an internal presence wanting to be perceived. And this perception, according to him, was the first step to understanding oneself. Still, it's important to remember that Cayce didn't consider this an absolute rule. Not everyone who wakes up at this hour is facing a spiritual calling, but he insisted that if the phenomenon repeats frequently, it's worth paying attention. What is happening inside me? What does my mind want to show me at this instant? These questions may seem simple, but they are profound, and they gain even more meaning when the body begins to show signs of aging. According to Cayce, advancing age isn't just physical, but also symbolic. It's as if the soul, realizing that time is changing, begins to organize what has been lived. This would explain why so many older adults start to have more vivid dreams, more frequent memories, and this curious awakening in the middle of the night. It's all part of a cycle of preparation, a kind of inner cleansing that happens in silence. Some of the most impressive accounts described by Cayce came from ordinary folks, without academic training or involvement with spiritual matters. Even so, they described very similar experiences. They would wake up between 2 and 4 in the morning, feel a kind of strange peace, and sometimes have ideas that seem not to come from themselves. There were those who decided to write down thoughts, write letters, reorganize decisions, or simply remain silent. For Cayce, this type of behavior was a sign that the person was in contact with deeper levels of their own consciousness. There was nothing supernatural about it. It was just the mind working at another pace, taking advantage of the silence to show what during the day was stifled. Therefore, he recommended that, upon waking up at this hour, one shouldn't rush to go back to sleep. Instead, one should observe oneself calmly. Cayce's approach has gained new interest from contemporary scholars, not because he offered ready-made answers, but because he proposed a different view of what we consider disorders. Instead of medicalizing all symptoms, he suggested listening to the body and mind as allies in the aging process. This doesn't exclude the importance of traditional medicine, but it expands the field of understanding. When someone wakes up at 3 in the morning repeatedly, it's common to seek medical explanations, which is absolutely valid. But if the tests are normal and the awakening still happens, perhaps it's worth observing what is happening on the subjective plane. How is the emotional state? Are there unresolved internal issues? Cayce believed that the body sends signals when the soul needs to reorganize something, and that, especially in old age, these signals become clearer. This view helps many people reframe what they experience. Instead of treating the awakening as a problem, they begin to see it as a necessary pause, something that allows important reflections. A 72-year-old woman said that, after years of waking up at 3 in the morning, she decided to simply accept and observe. She began to notice patterns in the thoughts that arose at those moments, things she hadn't resolved with her children, decisions she had postponed, old desires she never fulfilled. Little by little, she was writing everything down and mentally organizing her life. She said she never woke up distressed again. She still woke up at the same hour, but with a new attitude. This illustrates well what Cayce meant when he spoke about the potential for self-knowledge in these moments. It's not about adopting mystical practices, but about understanding that the body and mind continue to teach us, even after a certain age. Many older adults face the silence of the night with anxiety, believing that there is something wrong with their sleep or their health. But upon hearing accounts like this, they realize that perhaps they aren't alone in this experience. This in itself brings comfort. Knowing that others also go through it, and that there is a pattern observed even by scholars of the past, can help reduce anxiety and open the way for a new understanding. Of course, each person must observe their own limits and needs. In some cases, nighttime awakening may indeed require medical attention, but when everything is fine and yet sleep is interrupted regularly, it may be useful to look at this phenomenon as an invitation to introspection. Cayce didn't promise easy answers, but he left an important warning. Ignoring the signals of the body and soul is wasting precious opportunities for growth. Modern science still treads cautiously when dealing with topics involving consciousness and spirituality. The advancement of neuroscience has allowed for a better understanding of how sleep works, the stages of the brain, and hormonal cycles. But little is said about the content of these awakenings, what one feels, what one thinks, what one perceives in that moment between deep sleep and wakefulness. Cayce said that this space is a rare frontier, where the conscious and unconscious mind touch. And that's precisely why so many seniors begin to have insights during the night. They are brief moments, but loaded with meaning. It's not necessary to understand everything immediately. Sometimes it's enough to record what arose, a memory, a recurring worry, a forgotten emotion. These signs can indicate what the soul is trying to reorganize, and often that alone brings relief. There is a silent wisdom in the aging body. Little by little, it shows what needs to be resolved, not only in the physical but also in the emotional and symbolic. Waking up at 3 in the morning can be one of these signs, not to scare, but to remind of what hasn't been said yet, of what needs to be forgiven, of what needs to be accepted. Many seniors who have come to see this moment with different eyes report significant changes in the way they deal with their own past. Instead of avoiding these nights, they began to welcome them. Some people even created small rituals, writing down what they think, saying a silent prayer, listening to soft music, breathing attentively. This not only helps to deal better with sleep, but also strengthens the feeling that they are connected to something greater. Not in the religious sense, but in the human sense. An encounter with oneself. Cayce said that the soul doesn't shout, it whispers, and that it's in the silence of the night that these whispers become easier to hear. Perhaps that's why so many people, especially older folks, feel something different upon waking up at this hour. It's not just insomnia, it's a pause, a crack in time in which everything seems suspended, and the mind finds space to reorganize what it has lived. The body no longer has the same demands as in youth. The house is quieter, the routine is less hectic. This opens space for a more subtle listening. Waking up at 3 in the morning regularly can be one of life's last invitations to look inward with honesty. And that's why this experience, often ignored or treated as uncomfortable, can become a valuable opportunity for understanding and peace. What makes this experience even more relevant is the fact that it doesn't depend on belief. People of different backgrounds, religions, or even skeptics report this same awakening. The repetition of the hour, the absence of clear physical causes, the presence of unusual thoughts, all this suggests that there is a pattern that goes beyond the traditional explanation. Cayce only brought an interpretation that helps to make sense of this pattern. For him, the soul never stops working even when the body rests, and as time goes by, it seeks to resolve what has been left unresolved. Waking up during the night can be a reflection of this. And even if the spiritual explanation is not accepted by everyone, the simple act of paying attention to these moments can already generate changes. Not everything needs to be understood immediately. Sometimes it's enough to accept that certain processes follow their own logic. There is also a practical aspect to this approach. When someone decides to observe more carefully what they feel upon waking up at 3 in the morning, they begin to understand their own emotions better. They discover patterns, identify anxieties, rescue memories. This can lead to important conversations with family members, to decisions postponed for years, or simply to a greater sense of lightness. Self-knowledge has no age, and this stage of life is one of the most powerful for it. Longevity offers time, and time is exactly what many sought when they were younger. Cayce said that wisdom doesn't arrive with noise. It reveals itself in calm moments when the mind stops running and begins to listen. The seniors who wake up in the wee hours of the morning are not broken, nor are they sick. They are living a process that deserves to be welcomed with respect, patience, and attention. The central idea that Cayce proposed was simple. If the body wakes up, it's because something needs to be seen. This view is very different from the common approach, which tries to suppress the symptom with medications or relaxation techniques. Of course, in some cases this is necessary, but before seeking immediate solutions, it may be worth listening to what this awakening wants to say. Waking up repeatedly at the same hour is not random. It's a pattern that deserves to be investigated with curiosity. Old age is not a time of internal silence, as many think. On the contrary, it's a phase in which the mind gains new depth. And the more attention is given to these signs, the clearer the perception becomes that there is still much to be lived, understood, and adjusted. Even when everything seems in order, the body may be saying that there is something more to be noticed. Many older adults report that, after some time welcoming these awakenings, the relationship with sleep changes. They no longer become distressed for waking up, nor do they try to force the immediate return to sleep. They just remain in silence, attentive to what arises. For some, this has become an almost meditative practice, a time just for them, away from the noise of the world, in which they can reflect on their own trajectory. Cayce saw this as part of a larger cycle, in which the soul prepares for new steps. Not necessarily steps after life, but stages that will still be lived here, with more lucidity and serenity. He believed that aging didn't diminish the capacity for transformation. On the contrary, it made clearer the need to resolve what has been postponed. Therefore, these nocturnal awakenings could be the beginning of deep internal changes, even if silent. Changes that don't depend on age, but on the willingness to listen. The practice of writing down thoughts that arise in these moments is one of the simplest ways to give voice to this process. It's not necessary to write much, nor to find great revelations. Just record what one feels, what came to mind, even if it seems unimportant. Over time, patterns begin to emerge, recurring themes, names, sensations. This record helps to understand better what is happening on the emotional plane. Cayce recommended this practice as a tool for observation. He said that the soul manifests itself in a symbolic way, and that the strongest symbols arise in the moments when the world is silent. The night, for him, was that ideal moment. Many who followed this guidance reported having understood aspects of their life that previously seemed confusing. Sometimes a simple recorded memory helps to undo an emotional knot that had been tied for years. Waking up at 3 in the morning may seem like a nuisance, but perhaps it's one of the most important signs that the body sends when life is asking for more attention. When we stop seeing this as a defect and begin to see it as a meaningful pause, everything changes. Cayce never sought to create mysteries. His goal was to bring clarity. He saw each human experience as a point of learning, even the simplest ones. Therefore, his forgotten warning about the night still makes sense today. Instead of ignoring or medicating these moments immediately, perhaps the wisest thing to do is to ask, what is this silence trying to tell me? Sometimes the answers will not come from outside, but from within. And perhaps this is the greatest gift that these awakenings can offer, the chance to rediscover forgotten parts of oneself with more tranquility and understanding than ever before. Throughout life, we learn to value the active moments, full of tasks, noise, and movement. But in old age, the rhythm changes, and with it comes the opportunity to listen to what previously went unnoticed. The awakenings at 3 in the morning, so common among older adults, can be understood as this new type of listening. Cayce saw in these moments a turning point, where it's no longer about running after things but about understanding what they mean. He didn't ask anyone to blindly believe in his ideas. He just suggested that they pay attention. And for those who are living this repeated experience, the reflection is worth it. Is there something in me that is trying to emerge? What hasn't been resolved, said, or recognized yet? The night, with its absolute silence, can be the ideal scenario for this intimate encounter, without hurry, without obligation, only presence. Even if science doesn't yet have a definitive explanation for this phenomenon, it's undeniable that it exists. The reports are many, the patterns are real. And when this phenomenon is crossed with the vision left by Cayce, a new possibility of interpretation arises, a gentler, deeper, and more respectful reading of the experience of those who age. It's not about romanticizing aging, but about understanding it in all its layers. The body changes, it's true, but the mind remains active, and the soul, according to Cayce, has perhaps never been so clear in its signals as in this phase. Therefore, instead of fearing these awakenings or treating them as failures, perhaps it's time to welcome them as part of a natural process. A process that, with attention and care, can bring peace, understanding, and even new purposes. If you've made it this far, perhaps this topic has touched on something you yourself experience or know closely. And if this content has helped you see more clearly something that previously seemed just a nuisance, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. This allows us to continue bringing useful and well-cared-for reflections to people like you who value understanding and knowledge. Cayce's message, even forgotten by many, can still teach us to look more attentively at what the body and mind reveal with subtlety. Perhaps waking up at 3 in the morning is not a problem to be fought, but a reminder that there are still important conversations happening inside us. And if we pay attention, perhaps we will discover that this silence of the night is, in fact, one of the most sincere moments that life offers us.